Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hometown History. I'm Jamie.
I'm Dami.
And right now we have a quick short on the Howard Tunnels. So This is a preview into tomorrow's full lesson, episode 2.5. We're going to be at the Creek House. It's a private event, but we will be on live Zoom at 7 o'clock for both Retro York and Preserving the History in Newberrytown.
Yeah.
All right, so tonight, Howard Tunnel.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't familiar with the Howard Tunnel or York County, it is located near Seven Valleys, and it was in operation since 1838, so it's very old. And in fact, it is the second oldest active rail tunnel in the U.S. Many local historians claim it's the oldest railroad tunnel in America, but there's three others that claim the same title, including one in Johnstown.
Yeah. So originally, it was constructed by the York and Maryland Line and Railroad, and this formed this critical link between Baltimore the whole way up to Harrisburg, and it went right through York County. It was the Northern Central Railway, and up in the northern part of Pennsylvania, near Erie, Great Lakes region, they were making a lot of grain. So they needed to get that grain down to the ports in Baltimore, and so this train is what connected it from northern PA the whole way down to Baltimore.
Very cool.
Yeah. I had a book, darn, I didn't bring it with us, but we used a lot of information from Armand Gladfelder's book. He wrote The Flowering of the Codorus Palatinate. It's actually hard to get your hands on. I found it on a unique bookstore online.
Oh, cool.
It was over $100.
Whoa,
so that's a rare find if you can get your hands on one of those.
She's a real historian, everybody. So they didn't start laying the rail because they hit 275 thick solid rock barrier. So is that feet? 275 feet thick solid rock barrier. So you have different options when you come to this. So bring in enormous amounts of fill to pack in the low meadows, add an additional mile of track to lay a wide horseshoe curve, or tunnel through the slate. Yep.
And as you can see from this image here, anyone who's been on the rail trail, you get close to the Howard Tunnel and you can see how thick it is. So the engineers, they weren't quite sure what they were going to do. Like we said, we had these three options. Now, Gladfelder, he called it slate and others called it granite, but really it's metamorphic rock known as phyllite. I reached out to Jerry Jones, our hometown geologist, and he was the one that corrected us. He said how the rock works is that it was shale before tectonic forces caused the heat and pressure to change it, and it's officially called Harper's Formation based off of Harper's Ferry. Super cool.
Everyone needs a hometown history geologist.
That messaged you quickly on Facebook Messenger, so thank you, Jerry.
I did not learn about that in middle school science class when we covered geology. But so we're going to do a little quiz here. So guess the name of the engineer that came up with the tunnel to tunnel through the slate.
The engineer who divided it was?
It was Howard.
Howard Tunnel. Should have known that. Goodness.
And that was a softball question.
So the tunnel was built by Irish immigrants. They used handheld shovels and picks to dig through it. They drilled with a 9-pound sledgehammer, and they could use 3-foot handheld drills. Wow. Can you imagine 3 feet long handheld drills going into this 300-foot span?
They had to be so strong.
They also had a lot of whiskey from the local farmers to help them get through it at night. It was interesting because if you go down to the Howard Tunnel, again, this is all open access. You can see it from the rail trail. If you look out, that's where they camped. They camped at the tunnel because it took a number of weeks, if not months, for them to tunnel through this whole thing. So they could only get through 4 feet per day. That was the average cutting. And they also asked the local farmers to haul out the earth instead of just filling it right there, to haul it away so that it didn't increase the grade when the train came through.
The whole community came together.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Well, speaking of whiskey, so the farmers brought whiskey distilled on their farms, and the workers had parties with dancing, singing, because the camps were right there. You're not driving to and from. They didn't have automobiles back then.
Something to look forward to at night. No TV, no phones.
No, it's fun. You're around the campfire. And Gladfelder says that the local Germans must have loved the interaction because they continued to play their music even after the Irish left. The fiddlers, the Irish fiddlers, they left their mark on the county, which is interesting because you wouldn't know where that Irish influence came from.
Right.
So that's something new. And Gladfelder says that they were painted ladies of camp followers, and the local Germans marveled at the looseness of the women camp followers who frolicked in front of the men.
I was quite sure how to interpret this. Like, I'm reading Gladfelder's book, and he's talking about the painted ladies who jumped around the fire and followed the men. I'm like,
boosted morale.
I was like, that sounds really cool, actually. Like, that sounds fun. I wish I could go back and see one of those parties.
I don't know if we would have been invited to those parties. That would be something that, like, the menfolk would tell us about afterwards.
Don't go down to the Howard Tunnel.
Right.
So in Armand Gladfelder's book, in the front of it, he shows the North Codorus Township seal. And this shows in the top right corner the tunnel, which is really interesting. So originally it was one lane in 1838 when it was completed. If you go by it, by the way, you'll see a stone above it that says 1840. They weren't able to put the stone in until 2 years after.
Okay.
And the average train that went through squeezed by at 30 miles per hour.
That was fast back then.
Yeah, very true. So by the 20th century.
Okay, so then we have a quote to read to you. So, that the nature of the people had changed, wrote Gladfelder. Instead of bumbling country bumpkins, they became a sophisticated, worldly people who were willing to take on the new century with a confident vigor undreamed of a century earlier.
It's super interesting. And also, we are at Dami's backyard. So if you hear people driving by, this is hometown history and people are out with their four-wheelers. So
yeah, so
can't
just
control your neighbors.
Some high school kids going crazy.
Get out of my yard!
I know, where's my shotgun when I need it?
So the tunnel allowed the local community to foster, because now these farmers, if you grew a lot of grain or you had dairy, what were you going to do with it once you saturated the market within your neighboring, people that lived on the street? So now with the railroad, we could take a lot of these goods and we could ship it around. So it really allowed the area to grow and prosper. Mm-hmm. Then they found iron ore as well. So there was this bonanza for like 35 years. We're just digging in, taking out as much iron ore as they can. So eventually this single track through the Howard Tunnel wouldn't cut it. They were literally squeezing by. And so that is when they went through and made it bigger. They made it larger, 2 lanes. And here's a really cool picture of the workers digging the 2 lanes for the tunnel.
Make it bigger, make it better.
Yeah. And if you go through it, you'll see that it's lined with arched bricks around the sides and the ceiling. It's really just a beautiful landmark for York County.
They made it fancy.
Yeah.
Well, then that brings us to the Civil War, one of my favorite topics. So the Northern Central lost over 30 bridges from Baltimore to the Maryland line when the Confederates burned them down. So tens of thousands of Union troops headed for the front lines or to guard Washington passed through the tunnel in the first 2 years of the war, as well as trainloads of supplies, ammunition, and war materials. So you have to think back to the Civil War and how they were transporting their goods. It's not like they do it today. So you had to rely on the railroad. So you needed the bridges and the tunnels. And the Howard Tunnel caused significant concern for the Union Army officials during the Gettysburg campaign in June of 1863.
And here you can see an image. We love Lewis Miller. Anytime we can throw him into our shows.
Yeah, he's great.
So there on the right are the Confederates, and they did come through York County. And so it was a real threat. In the Howard Tunnel, they were genuinely scared that it was going to be taken over by the Confederates. And so with these fears and they're mounting, would they come after the Howard Tunnel next?
Right.
So Major General Darius Couch of the Department of the Susquehanna dispatched Colonel William Thomas of the 20th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia to guard the Northern Central as well as the Howard Tunnel. So they
very
were
important.
Union troops on top of that tunnel.
Right. And then the militia got together and they dug pits near the tunnel and on the hillside and on the crest, and then they waited for the rebels. So they're hunkered down. They're waiting.
Just sitting up there like, wait till the Confederates come to the tunnel. We're not going to let them take this tunnel.
No. And they hauled artillery pieces to the top of the tunnel. So that was a huge deal. Yeah. And at least a full company of men, roughly 100, guarded the tunnel and camped nearby. So, I mean, this was a huge operation. And they may have used the same location as the old railroad camp. So there you go. That was repurposed as well.
Bet they didn't have painted ladies and fiddles during that time.
I think they probably still had whiskey. But, but that's the same camp that was used 2 decades earlier by the work crews digging the tunnel.
Yeah. The Confederates did arrive on the afternoon of Saturday, June 27th. Elements of the 35th Battalion, Virginia Cavalry approached the tunnel, but they did not attack.
Good.
They declined with the tails between their legs, and they ran away in the other direction.
Pennsylvania, we're scrappy.
Right?
We're scrappy.
They realized the strength of our Union soldiers, and they just said, no, not messing with this one. So they trotted back to Seven Valleys, and they rejoined the main body of the battalion, and then they went to Spring Forge, which is now Spring Grove, to camp.
I think that was a smart move. I wouldn't have wanted to mess with our guards.
No way, Confederates.
That evening, the 20th PVM withdrew toward York and then York Haven, which is right down the road from us. And they abandoned the tunnel because they didn't need to guard it anymore. And the patrols from the 17th Virginia Cavalry subsequently, I can't talk today, burned the nearby railroad bridges but did not damage the tunnel. So there you go, another example of how important it was. The bridges were being burned, but the tunnel survived. Yeah. Steam trains again passed through the Howard Tunnel within weeks after the U.S. military railroad replaced the burnt bridges.
So eventually that same tunnel was going to house our dear President Abraham Lincoln in his funeral procession. And if you are interested in learning more about that, we are going to have our local expert, Scott Mingus. He has written books on the topic.
Yes.
He'll be speaking tomorrow after our main episode, probably around 7:30, 7:45 on Zoom, if you want to hear more about that. So yeah.
Yeah, tune in tomorrow. We're really excited to talk to Scott, and we're really excited to tell you about the rail trail.
Yeah. Watch us on YouTube. Go to Hometown History, Jamie and Dami's Yoko backstory to learn more. Again, next episode tomorrow, Facebook Live, and we will see you guys there.
Yeah, there we go. That's hard. Thanks, guys.